and welcome to Lunch for the Soul. I'm Melissa Wilson with Fox 26 News in Houston. Really happy to welcome you here today. I hope you've been here to Lunch for the Soul before. If not, it's a time to talk about sometimes some tough things in life, but then how faith can help us get on the other side. I feel like it's a time that we can really learn from each other. Today, perhaps if you were going through a hard time, if you've suffered grief in your life, maybe you've had a recent loss, then this can really help you. If you've been depressed or if you've been going through anything mentally tough, it's Suicide Awareness Month. And we want to make sure you know that help is available. There is a number, it's so easy, 988. You can text, you can dial that, and you can get immediate help. So we'll be talking about that. But I want to introduce you to a very special guest who knows all too well about grief, and she's going to walk us through that, and then she's trying to help you with 6 really important tips. So let's bring in Theo Boyd. Hello, welcome to Lunch for the Soul.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm really happy to have you here because you have some really wise words of advice from things that you've gone through, and it's been a tough time that happened really not too long ago to you. So let's go back in time and just talk about what was going on in your life. It was a couple years ago. Your parents were getting close to celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. They live in a beautiful area near Dallas, and I want to show everybody their gorgeous property. It's so special. And then something really tough happened. Why don't you start there?
Well, my parents were peanut farmers in north central Texas, and I was a school teacher out for the summer in Waxahachie, Texas, which is about an hour away. And I got a phone call on July 29th, 2019, that there had been an accident on the farm. And when I got there, I learned that my father had accidentally run over my mom with one of the farm tractors, and it killed her instantly. And, like you said, we were about to celebrate their 50th. So rather than that celebration, we had to transition into her funeral. And shortly after that, the grief counselor that had been counseling my dad and I through the complicated grief, she died suddenly. And so these things just keep happening. And the whole time I'm journaling, because that's what I do, right? My dad was a minister and a preacher, and he wrote poetry about the farm and wrote sermons, and I learned to write from him. And then shortly after my counselor died, I went through another loss, which is divorce. That is another grief. And then Father's Day of 2022, I went to check on my dad, and I found him that morning. I wanted to surprise him with breakfast, but I found he had taken his life.
It is just so hard to think about one after another of losing your parents. And it's such a big loss. And like you said, your marriage as well. So later we'll go more through that, but I want to make sure people can learn from you. And so you decided to put this pain into helping other people and helping yourself by writing it down. And we all know that makes a big difference. And so you're sharing my grief is not like yours. When you came up with that title, what did you mean by that? Because we do all grieve differently. Everybody's grief is different, yet in a way it's the same, right? I mean, we have to go through those stages of grief.
It's so important to me that people understand why I titled it that. Shortly after my mom's death and funeral, well-intentioned friends and family were coming to me, and other grievers out there, you can relate, and they're giving you advice and sometimes offering comparisons. And it didn't matter what anybody said to me, the words just kept replaying in my mind. My grief is not like yours. If you haven't lost your mom by a tractor driven by your father, then I can't relate to you. And so I felt very unheard in my grief early on. And I thought, if I'm feeling this way, there has to be millions of other people feeling unheard in their grief. So my mission now in life is to help people learn how to not only grieve, I don't want to say grieve successfully, but to help those that are helping grieving individuals know what to say and know what to do. And My Grief is Not Like Yours is a book for you to own the title for yourself. When you have the book, it's your title. And after each chapter, we put questions in relating to the chapter back to the readers so they can journal, and there's journaling notes in the book so they can journal in their own grief and their own pain and get that out of here and onto a page.
And that's what you did. How did it help you? Did you feel some of that pain releasing from your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit, all of that when you're getting it out of your body?
You know, yes. I tell people all the time, you have to get it out, whatever that outlet is.
Mhm.
Fishing, cooking, walking, exercise, writing. For me, it was writing, but I didn't even know what the outlet was. It found me. Sure, I'd always journaled, never written a book. But as I'm journaling, I realized maybe at 47 years old, which was my age then, maybe I should write a book. And a friend of mine walked by my desk because I was already teaching school. I was back in school at this time. And she read some of the notes and she said, "You have to write a grief book." And I thought, I had a really hard time getting my hands on a book that hit me as hard as I'd been hit. There's a lot of resources out there, but not as many resources for traumatic loss, tragic loss, suicide loss. And so
Mhm.
I wrote it. I decided that's my goal. There's the two most important days in your life: the day you were born and the day you know why you were born. And I was born to write this book.
That is so powerful. You're giving me goosebumps. What is the feedback that you're getting from people once they read it? Are you getting it more from people who say, "Oh no, I didn't realize, and I need to learn how to talk to people," or is it more people who are in grief and saying, "Thank goodness, this is helping me work through these stages of grief"?
It's both. At book events, we've been on a Texas book tour now since May of 2023. We'll be at Barnes and Noble in Dallas this Saturday, and I get everything. I get people that bring their book in for me to sign. They've already read it. I get people that have listened to it on Audible. So if you're not tired of hearing my voice after this, I did record it on Audible, so you can go listen to that. But I get a lot of people that say, "Thank you for writing down what I could not say to my family. I couldn't get it out vocally." So they gave the book to their family and said, "Here, this is what I'm
Mhm,
feeling." One
mhm.
lady, her son had died in a car accident, and she said she went to the cemetery and read part of the book to him to let him know what she was feeling. So it's all those things that are not pretty. It's ugly,
Mhm.
but it's all those things that we as Americans, as a society, as humans all over the world, we experience loss. And
And
I think it's so important that we as a society in America where we live allow people to grieve and grieve in
mhm.
the way that they need to.
I want to go back to something that you said that really caught my attention because I think it happens to a lot of people in a lot of places in life. So I feel like they could even use your book when there's maybe not grief of a loved one, maybe it's grief of a sickness, because I'm a medical reporter. And so what I hear a lot when I'm interviewing people is I will hear other people come up and talk to them. And I'm, let's say cancer. I'm interviewing somebody about cancer. And somebody comes up and all of a sudden they're telling them, "Oh, well, this person has cancer and this person has, and oh, when I had cancer." And instead of helping them and making them feel related, like it's making that person even more depressed, right? And like you said, people will tell you about their grief. Well, that is not what you want to hear when you're grieving, right? So how do you tell people and help them learn the right things to say to help no matter what the circumstance is?
I'm going to take a lesson from my mother that I speak about quite often when I'm out speaking. My mom was completely deaf. As you'll read in the book, I tell you about her story. At 18 months old, she lost her hearing. Now, this did not play a role in the accident. The accident was just a freak accident. It had nothing to do with her hearing. Her and my dad had worked around tractors for 50 years. But because of my mother's hearing loss, she was so much more empowered with her other senses to understand what was going on, in a room. So I have a chapter in the book called "In the Room." And I talk about the room that my dad is in. He was 6'4" tall. This is him with me back here. He was this charismatic individual that commanded a room. His presence was great. Yet my mom's presence was smaller, quieter, a soft, subtle space. She wouldn't talk much, but she was present. My mom was the most present person in a room. We would come home from a speaking event where my dad was the guest speaker, and he would say, "Sue," that was my mom's name. "Sue, now what was that? What did they say? Who was that?" My mom knew everything. because she was present. So the lesson that we can take from Sue Boyd, my mother, is to just be present. You don't have to say any big thing. You don't have to do any big thing. Just be. The most memorable moments for me early on in my grief are when somebody would just come be with me, sit with me, let me talk if I wanted to or not, maybe just sit and drink a cup of coffee with me. But those are the things that are most important to a griever. It is your presence. Let them talk if they want to and just be present.
Oh, that is so powerful and such an important reminder. And again, I want to remind everybody that's for anything, for sickness, for death, for any sadness that can make such a difference in people's lives. What are some other things that you think are really empowering for people to realize?
Don't rush yourself and give yourself grace. I like to say, give yourself grace in grief. You know, we're very hard on ourselves, and I have to practice what I preach. I'm still very hard on myself.
Mhm.
But let's just take a step back. If you want to stay in bed all day, that's okay. Guess what? Tomorrow's another day. But
Mhm.
I tell people all the time, it's not one day at a time. When something tragic happens, it is sometimes 1 second at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time. Take a deep breath, talk to someone. I have a dog. He's actually laying right here beside me. I've had him for 10 years. He's heard everything.
Oh,
Find
I bet.
something to get it out of here and get it to let somebody else be your sounding board. A counselor trained in your specific type of grief is critical to healing. Critical. I could not have made it without Gail, my counselor. She was phenomenal. And I'm so thankful I had her for the few months during that part of the book that I was writing. And I'd known her for 18 years before that. All these pearls of wisdom are in my book from Gail. I have a couple of chapters just dedicated to my relationship with my counselor. I cannot stress the importance of that for anyone. It doesn't matter if you're watching somebody go through something or if you're going through something or if life's great, still go see someone because it's time that we start taking care of this muscle as much as we are the other muscles. This muscle is so important.
Yeah, yeah, it really, really is. When you think back to your dad, and you mentioned that he was a pastor for decades, I know that you've talked about how the whole family was trying to support him. And I know that had to be so, I would think almost uncomfortable because you're grieving yourself, you're trying to help him, he's grieving in a whole other way and on so many levels of loss. And he had the love and the power of God and Jesus in him, yet it just at the end he couldn't take it anymore. Walk us through the importance that you feel of all of us knowing that we're vulnerable. And you know, if a pastor who knows the Bible so well can go through something that devastating, it shows us truly anybody can.
Absolutely. My dad had been a minister of a Bible church about half a mile from where we grew up. He built it on my great grandfather's land.
Mhm.
And we had about 40 to 50 members, and I played piano. And,
Oh,
my chain of command in life was Jesus and daddy. So the night of my mom's accident, I heard my dad saying words I'd never heard him say. It was frightening to this 47-year-old daughter.
yeah.
And I called my counselor and thank the Lord she answered the phone. And I said, my dad is saying horrible things. He is cursing God. I just don't, he ran over my mom. She's dead. It was just horrible. And I walk people through this bit by bit in my book. But she told me the most important thing that I will always remember, and it's so powerful. She said, let him say the words that he needs to say. Those are the words that carry the weight of his pain. And I think it is so important that we as a society allow grievers to grieve. Now, I'm not saying go into a room full of kindergartners and start cussing.
Of course.
But if you've got a loved one that's doing this, it's okay. That grief is so great that, I dropped my guard 3 years later when he took his life. I had thought that we'd gotten past that part. I thought we were in a good space, but I realized he never was, and the counseling had stopped. We'd started a new lady after the counselor had died, but that didn't last very long. So I wonder if I'd have kept him in counseling or, but I do say, you will hear this often: God won't give you more than you can handle. Well, that is not true. It's not even biblical. God may give you more than you can handle, but that doesn't mean it's not still part of his plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that and another thing that is so powerful to hear. And I know that with it being Suicide Awareness Month, you really want to get out the word that like you said, the counseling really helped you, and you feel like it can make a difference if somebody's feeling vulnerable.
If you just get one thing to take away from a 1 hour session, just one thing, and that's about all I would get because I was just so consumed by grief. I would get one thing to hang on until the next time I got there. And then I'd get one more thing. And then guess what? Now I've got an arsenal of things and they're in my book, and I'm sharing that with readers because by belonging, we can share, and by sharing, we belong. And I just think it's so important. I know because of the F words. That's chapter 11 of my book. It's called More F Words. Get more F words: friends, fun, food, family, faith, fellowship, foundation. Get some
Yeah.
F words and hang on those F words, because those F words are what are going to get you through to the next day and the next. I like to call this group of ladies, they're my just closest friends. They're amazing, but I don't see them very often. But I call them my fairy blonde mothers. They show up. And if you saw them, you would say, those look like fairy blonde mothers. They own a cute little dress shop in downtown Waxahachie, but they also own funeral homes.
Yeah.
And these ladies know death, and they also know life. And they were there for me. Every time something bad happened, they magically appeared. And I talk about them in great detail in the book. But get some fairy blonde mothers, get some F words. And I realized that there's people out there going through hard things, or harder, everybody thinks that what they're going through is the worst, but believe me, there's somebody out there that's got it worse. And no matter what you're going through, I just think it's so important that you realize all you need is just one good, true. You'll learn who your true friends are in grief. Grief separates the children from the adults. And I think it is just so important that people know that, we're all in this together. We're all grieving in some way of something, whether it's a loss, a pet loss, a job, the economy, everybody's got a grief in their life. So we're all in this thing together, and it's time that we just start sharing that.
I was looking when you're talking about your F words. I noticed in the farmhouse that there was this beautiful cross hanging that says faith, and I thought that was so touching with the angel. And do you find that positive affirmations around you make a difference? I love that so much. I do that all over my house.
Absolutely. One of the best affirmations right now for me is reading reviews on my book. When
I bet.
When I read a review that's a good one, I will print it off and go stick it on the refrigerator. When I read a review where I helped somebody, that just fuels me. That fuels me to keep going. And I realize there's people out there that didn't have the foundation, that F word, that I had. But because I did have such a strong foundation on the farm with mom and daddy, and growing up with cows and chickens and grandparents across the road and gardens and hound dogs, I realized because of my foundation, I'm able to go out and give a voice to what they're feeling and give a voice to grief. And I set out on writing this book. And when I decided I was going to do it, I said, I'm going to give a new voice to grief, a voice that it's never had before, because I just feel that God put me on this earth for that reason.
And I just read this: my grief is not like yours. And it just means so much in so many different ways. Like you said, it could be the loss of job. It could be the economy right now, and everybody's lost so much money and they're feeling desperate. And these words really work in every aspect of that life. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. It is. And, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to them that love him. Well, sometimes all things is not all good things. When God says all things, he means all things. So my parents lived extraordinary lives. They died in extraordinary ways, but their love story, their 50 years of testimony in this community in Hill County, Texas, it is now worldwide. I've had reviews from people in the UK and Australia. So it's like now my parents in this little bitty town, these little peanut farmers, are helping people even in their death.
Well, and I hope that that makes their lives and all that you've been through more meaningful, knowing that you're making that difference and that letting go of that pain and sharing it, it's ended up helping so many other people. What a blessing.
Thank you. It's just meant so much to me to know that the words I was writing just for me are
Mhm.
helping other people. It never dawned on me until somebody said, "Oh my gosh, that's how I feel." And I was like, "Really?" And then I realized we're all in this together. None of us are going to get out of this thing alive. So we need to stick together and help each other while we're here.
Well, and good for you to keep up a sense of humor because this only happened to you a few years ago, 2 years ago, right?
It's pretty recent. My mom died 5 years ago, and then
Hmm.
my dad was just 2 years ago, Father's Day. So,
Hmm.
Daddy, talking about this man again, 6'4", tall, charismatic, the Charles Ingalls of our county is what I like to call him. He was so funny. And I put in the book, it's not just a cry all the time book. It kind of has a Steel Magnolias feel. Just
Yeah.
about the time you're going to bawl your eyes out, I make you laugh because Daddy had jokes and humor, and it wouldn't be a story about my parents without the
Mhm.
humor in there.
Well, I'm so thankful to have gotten to meet you, to share your beautiful, powerful message. And kudos for you for working through the grief, for keeping the sense of humor. I just feel the love in your heart and all that you have to give everybody. And I'm so happy to be able to spread the message even more for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you letting me get that out and share the story and have more people learn about their love story that could help
Mhm.
them.
Well, I'm just shooting up some love from Houston, up 45 to land in your lap, okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay, lots of love. All right, take care of you. Thanks again for
Thank
joining us on Lunch
you.
for the Soul. All right, and thank you all for being here. I want to remind you, maybe you joined us late. Guess what? It's easy to find us. We are all over the place. You can always find us on fox26houston.com, our Fox 26 Facebook page. You can reach out to me and email me if you want to be here on Lunch for the Soul at melissa.wilson@fox.com. You also have our Fox Local app. You name it, we've got you covered. Thanks again for taking time to be here today. And I hope you'll reach out to me. I hope I get to profile you sometime. And let's all be as blessed as we can. Have a beautiful day.